Today on June 24th, 2021, BlackBerry released their first quarter results for fiscal year 2022. I'm going to go over the numbers. They beat street estimates, so that's awesome stuff. I'm going to explain if they're good or bad in terms of the numbers overall. I'm going to go over the conference call. I'm going to go over the annual general meeting as well. Essentially, basically, they repeated what they stated yesterday in the annual general meeting in today's conference call, but a little bit more details on both sides. You could go to BlackBerry Investors webpage, by the way, to listen to the audio replay. Highly encourage you to do that, so that way, in case I missed something, you could hear it as well. You could pull up the financial reports of the past and the current as well, what they released today as well. So if you want to check them out, highly encourage you to do that as well. And I'm going to also cover in this video what I'm expecting for the next earnings, along with the patent sale, the progress. But they mentioned that in the conference call as well. So stay tuned for that in general sense for the next earnings as well, because I'm going to mention that in this video. If we're looking at the numbers overall, total company revenue came in at 174 million, beating street estimates, which is awesome stuff. Because if you go to Yahoo Finance, type in BlackBerry, click on analysis, and look at revenue estimates. Average estimates came in at 171, or was expected to be 171.25 million. So 174 million obviously beats that. Awesome stuff, great stuff overall. The high estimates was 176 million, but most people focus on the average anyway, so it's not a big deal on that side. This is technically good news, even though it's a year-over-year decline. So technically the bad news, it's a year-over-year decline. If you go to Q1 of last year, right about here, pull it up. If you look at GAAP revenue, because the 174 million was GAAP revenue, last year, same time, same earnings report, came in at 206 million for the revenue. And if you want to know about the non-GAAP, which technically is not important in terms of comparison, but it's 214 million nonetheless. Now, the reason why I'm saying that it's not all bad news, quick disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a professional. Everything I do share with you is just my opinion. It is not advice. So please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling. Now, back to the 174 million. The reason why I'm saying this is not all bad news in terms of year-over-year decline is because this does not include the full patent revenue licensing revenue itself. And BlackBerry already stated last earnings that they're forecasting this fiscal year overall. So the next 4 quarters, so this is the first quarter of the fiscal year. We have another 3 left. They were forecasting them all to be pretty low, and pretty much like if you take the full, I think they said somewhere between 675 million, I can't remember exactly, to 715 million. And if you take 715 million divided by 4, you get 178 million, around that ballpark. So essentially they're expecting every quarter to be around, the revenue for every quarter to be around 170 million to almost 180 million. So, but that's because they're not expecting their patent revenue licensing to be full throttle or kicking in full throttle, because the patent sale is putting the patent revenue licensing on pause. I know that's a mouthful, hopefully that makes sense, but because they're trying to sell a bunch of patents, they're not collecting patent revenue license or patent revenue licensing revenue from those patents, if that makes sense. Now, another good sign is if you take the 250 million, because they expect 250 million per year for patent revenue licensing, and divided by 4, that's about, I think is about 63 million, if I'm not mistaken. And I might be off a little bit, I apologize, but around the $60 million range, right? And they were expecting this quarter to be around 10 million. The only thing is, though, they got bumped up 14 million because some customers decided to pay ahead of time, a little bit in advance, so it got bumped up to 14 million. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because technically that in advance affects the future earnings or quarterly earnings. So future quarterly earnings will be slightly lower, hypothetically, right? Not guaranteed, but in essence could be, because they paid it in advance. So I'm going to take the 10 million, and if you take 10 million and subtract that from, let's just say 60 million, that's a difference of 50 million. It should be a little bit more because it's more than 60 million, but just to do basic sense, then 50 million addition in terms of patent revenue licensing, add 50 million to 174 million. Since I already took off a little bit from the 60 million, let's just make it 175 million plus 50 million, that's 225 million. So if you go back to last year's Q1, 225 million beats 206 million. And if you want to be ambitious and compare it to non-GAAP, even though it's different, 225 million beats 214 million. So it would have been a year-over-year growth. It would have destroyed, like, this earnings would have been phenomenal. The stock would have actually, given, like, for example, the hype and everything, the stock would have actually flown. But because of the way it is with the patent sale delay, it's technically not recognized, and technically revenue is not coming in yet. So can't be recognized, and the stock can't technically react right now because it would be early reacting and it would be baked into the stock price too early, hypothetically. Now, in terms of the overall breakdown of the 174 million, IoT revenue came in at 43 million, and then you have cybersecurity revenue coming in at 107 million, and then licensing and other revenues, again, like I mentioned, 24 million. The good thing is about cybersecurity revenue, by the way, I think they said the same thing last earnings too, if I'm not mistaken, but this earnings, they said 90% of that of cybersecurity software is recurring revenue, so repeat customers, so that's awesome stuff overall. If you look at earnings per share, non-GAAP, it was a loss of 5 cents. In terms of GAAP, it was a loss of 11 cents. Technically still aligned with street estimates, technically. So if you go to earnings estimates for earnings per share, average estimates was a loss of 5 cents, and the low estimates was a loss of 11 cents. It's around the ballpark. Technically, it's a little bit of a miss. I'm not too concerned about earnings per share at the moment, given the whole entire thing, plus also what they stated. So I'm going to talk about what they stated in terms of conference calls. So a bunch of design wins, all that stuff. The most important stuff that I picked up on is that essentially the first thing, I'll mention the patent sale first. So for the patent sale, in terms of the annual general meeting, we were already anticipating, if you saw my video yesterday, that we were anticipating that today, in terms of earnings, we're not going to see the patent sale go through, or it's not going to be represented in this earnings, because he mentioned that it was ongoing. So therefore, if it's ongoing, that the patent sale has not finalized yet, so therefore it was not going to be represented in this earnings. Not a surprise though, because I was anticipating it was going to be in the next earnings anyway, but I was just hoping that it potentially could be in this earnings. So for the patent sale, like I mentioned, we were not expecting it was going to be in this earnings, but he stated in this conference call that essentially, in general sense, did not say it exactly like this, but it's in the final stretch. So like in the final phases. So because of that, I'm anticipating it still to be in the next earnings, but like to be announced in the next earnings. But because he stated it essentially in the final stretch, there's a chance it could be like disclosed and the numbers coming out and everything before next earnings. And if so, that's awesome. And the reason why I'm saying that's awesome, if it comes out and during the earnings, the stock will actually jump really, really well. But if it comes out soon, then the stock will, regardless either way, if it comes out soon or not, but we'll get a $3 jump. And I would rather have that $3 jump now, to be honest, than later. And the reason why I'm saying this stock will jump $3, what I'm expecting minimum is a $3 jump, again, this is just my opinion, is because if you go back to the BlackBerry and Qualcomm lawsuit, BlackBerry won against Qualcomm, and the settlement amount was about 840 million, 850, 860 million. I can't remember exactly, but it was in the $800 million range. And the stock, once that news came out and the settlement came out and all that stuff, and BlackBerry was awarded the settlement, the share price jumped $2 to $3 US dollars based off that news. So given how much patents are being sold from what I'm reading, nothing's guaranteed though, but it seems like it's a massive amount, plus how long it's taking, which to me is a sign that it's definitely a massive deal. But that's just my opinion. So I'm expecting minimum $1 billion in terms of a sale for the deal. So $1 billion for the selling the patents. I'm expecting minimum $3 US dollar jump for the sale of the patents. So be on the lookout for that. If it is the final stretch, then expect it before earnings. But worst case scenario, it looks like, actually, to be honest, technically it's not guaranteed to come out next earnings, but given how they said it's essentially, again, they did not say this as exact word for word, definitely not exact word for word, but I'm interpreting it, and it's the final stretch, so guaranteed it'll be in next earnings represented. So there's that. Now, in terms of what they stated on both annual general meeting and today, and I think it's good to touch base on, is John Chen basically is stating that he actually said this in the annual general meeting, but they're operating as if they're a startup company. And the reason why this is important is because if you notice, their expenses are technically pretty high, a little bit, not too much, but decently high, more than normal. And the reason why is because the spend for art research and development, all this stuff, they are spending more for the sales team as well, but not much of a concern. I think that's very well needed to spend more money on the sales team because they have great products. Unfortunately, even if you have great products, if nobody's aware of them, if you can't sell your product because nobody knows that you're selling and all stuff, like that's a very important aspect of the side of the business. Sales is very important. So if they're focusing on that and spending more money, I'm all for it, as long as they could bring in more revenue. Now, one thing I want to cover as well is the cash flow. Just because, like I stated, they're operating as if they are a startup company, and just seeing how much cash they're burning is relatively important, but I'm not too concerned yet at the moment, so it's not a big deal, but I just want to cover it. So as of this earnings, or actually no, this is the representation right here. So as of this earnings today for the first quarter results, their cash positions in terms of like short-term investments, long-term investments, cash on hand, restricted cash, and all stuff is 769 million. And then last earnings was 804 million. So they're burning about a little bit over $30 million, but not really concerned, just because I think they're doing a good job overall in terms of software development, product development, and spending money where they need to spend. And they're hiring more people. Now, I know in terms of shareholders, hiring more people is technically, it counts as a cost and it increases cost. It's not hypothetically ideal for shareholders because, again, spending more money. But I think it's good because it indicates growth, in my opinion. If you're expanding and getting more employees, it shows growth. But usually, unfortunately for shareholders, the opposite is better. If you lay off people, you're getting rid of costs, so therefore there's more value and all that stuff. So, but take it as you will, depending on which way you want to take it. I like to see it as growth because you're expanding and all that stuff and like growing into different sectors. For next earnings, what I'm anticipating is pretty much about the same revenue, a little bit of a decrease though because of QNX. He mentioned that from automakers, OEMs, they told them that next earnings, they're expecting to pump out less vehicles because of the chip shortage. Next earnings is going to be affected quite a bit from what he's been hearing. And since that will affect automakers are pumping out less vehicles, to me that affects QNX, and he made that aware that it affects QNX. So revenue will be slightly lower. Now their backlog for QNX was 450 million last earnings, and now it's 490 million. So that's good. So it's growing, and I'm anticipating it's going to grow even more because they said it was a conservative amount. The only thing is though, in terms of the payouts, because it's awarded and all stuff, is going to be in the next 4 to 7 years. But again, they were conservative about that number as well. But just essentially, my expectation for next earnings is slightly lower revenue, slightly lower. Again, that does not include the high patent revenue licensing that they usually get. But the patent sale will be reflected in the next earnings. So technically, next earnings should be phenomenal, technically. So we'll see how it goes. Hoping for the best, but we'll see how it is. So that's basically it for the video. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate it. Hope you liked it. Hope you found it helpful. If you did, consider dropping a like. It does help with the channel, so thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. I'm sure I missed something. I feel like I'm missing something, but if I remember anything, by the way, I'll comment it down below and I'll pin it as well. If you like videos like this, by the way, or other financial videos or other stock videos that I'll be posting in the future, consider subscribing so you can be notified when I do upload those videos. And that's basically it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.